All right, so we are going to start today's labs. And last week, we were able to do, at least to some point, to show a list view. And we were supposed to show how to actually do databases by saving into a room database. But along the line, we faced some challenges. And after I fixed the issues, I shared the code, the complete code, and then a video explaining what happened and how to fix the code on Moodle. So I'm hoping that most of us have been able to take a look at that video and also downloaded the code. But if you have not, I have shared the code on the Zoom chat. So maybe you can take a look at it quickly and then download it so that because we are going to build on it from today. And today we are going to look at how to create reminders or create scheduled tasks in Android. And by doing so, we are going to make use of broadcast receivers. So for the lab task, this is basically what we are going to do today. We are going to create a time-based reminder for future payments in our banking app. So assuming we create a payment which happens sometime in the future, we want to set up schedule a reminder. And how do we get reminded? We want to show a notification when the reminder is due. And also we are able to show a list of payments. So if you delete the payment, it should cancel any reminder that has been scheduled. So basically that's what we are going to do today. And today's lab is going to be a little bit different from what we have done previously in terms of how the demonstration is going to be. Previously, we used to do live coding, but I think the feedback is that sometimes it becomes okay, back and forth, opening several files. So it becomes difficult to follow along. So what we are going to do today is that we have gone ahead to code all the functions that we need for today, and we are going to demonstrate the running app as well as the code by going through it line by line and probably at a slower pace so that we don't do like we have been doing before. We do live coding, and by live coding you have to be going up and down from some different files, switching between screens and stuff like that, so sometimes it's difficult to follow. Anyway, so on your own extra work, if you are doing some continuing fixing the work outside the lab, you can decide to change some of the UI elements. You realize that on the payment screen or payment activity, we have a text box that collects or that receives the date. You can fix it by maybe changing it to a date picker, and you can also add action to the notification. For example, if you want to cancel, if the notification comes in and you want to cancel that payment, you want to be able to click on a certain button on notification to be able to cancel the payment. So you can do all these things in your own free time, but all the basic functionalities that you need to do these things will be created today in the lab. So for task scheduling, there are several ways to do task scheduling in Android. You can do the basic ones that we have always been doing, the alarm manager, and you can also do what we call the work manager and also cloud messaging. So you can take a look at how the work manager works and then the alarm manager works. The alarm manager basically makes use of the system's clock, and at every stroke of time, this the at every stroke of time, the system sends a broadcast behind the scene at the operating system level. The operating system level, and okay, so there should be a problem with my microphone. Let me check again. I guess it's okay. All right. Okay, so the microphone is good. Okay. So at the operating system level, there are broadcast messages when at every stroke of time, and based on that, you can use the alarm manager, which is a service to monitor that time change and then schedule an activity. So that's what we are going to do today. And when the broadcast is sent to the operating system level, how do you listen to the broadcast and do the appropriate task? We are going to use broadcast receivers today. And one thing that has come up mostly is that you create the broadcast receivers and you forget to actually add it to the manifest. And if you don't add that to the manifest, it actually doesn't get used. So you always get complaints that, oh, I've created the broadcast receiver, but it's not working. So that's why I've put this note here. Please don't forget to put it in the manifest. And we are going to do that for us to see how it works. And about date and time pickers, like I said, on the payment activity, we have a text box that is used to collect or receive the date. But of course, appropriately, it should be a date picker. So it is actually better that when on your own extra, or maybe when you are doing your project, you can go a step further by using date and time pickers instead of a text box for a date. And about how to build a notification to have these two links here. Um, so like Aku has put in the test in the chat, it is very important to note that when you don't put the broadcast receiver in the manifest, you don't get any errors, right? If you forget to put it in there, you don't get any errors, but it doesn't work. So the whole operating system is not aware that you are listening to such broadcast at the system level, right? So you don't receive the broadcast when the broadcast is sent. So let's without much ado, let's go to straight to why we are doing today. And I will open the code. All right. So from last week, we are able to create our list views. If you have not been able to follow to that end, like I said, I have the code online, and I have a video also on the model explaining how we had the issues that we had last week and how to fix it. And again, we are not going to do it as we have done by coding live, because as and when the number of things that we code live increases, we realize that it becomes a lot of back and forth. So sometimes the feedback has been that people are not able to follow to code. So today we have gone ahead to create everything that we need, and what we will do is that we are going to follow it line by line. In that way, it makes it easy for you to follow as well. All right, so I'll quickly demonstrate the final app. So let me stop what I was running again and run it again. So when I run, it builds everything and the emulator starts. And because we have logged in already, so it goes straight to the menu activity. So I have a payment list, and you can see that I have some list items entered already. I can create a new one by coming to new payment, and assuming that I have somebody whose name starts with this name, and I am paying to a bank account, and sometime in the future. So let's say I'm paying it to a bank account on 5th of January is past. So let me say 5th on February in 2021, right? And I'm paying some X amount of money into that person's account. I click on accept, and you see that I see a toast that says that a reminder has been created for a future payment. So we will show that in the code. Again, if I look at the list of payments, you see that I have the list, and if I click on the list, I'm able to scroll up and down of the list. If I click on the list, it asks me whether I want to delete it or not. So let's look at how to actually show the notification. So we go to the code, right? And this is the history, payment history activity. And this is the payment activity itself. So in the payment activity, we realize that previously, if you have seen the code previously, there's a different way of accessing components on the view. But with the new Gradle and the updated version of Kotlin, you will see that there has been a new way of accessing variables with what they call view binding. And with that view binding, what happens behind the scenes is that with every single activity or every single layout that you create, behind the scenes there is this class which ends start with the name of the activity and then binding. With that class, you are able to use that class to access the variables on that activity. So you don't do find view by ID anymore, and that means that how you inflate variables, how you inflate the layouts have changed, how the list accesses the items have also changed. So that's what we had the challenges with. So I quickly did the fixes, and what we have here is that in the binding of the activity, find a button called accept, and you set the on click listener. What happens when I click on the list on the accept button? So I find the date item and check whether it is empty, right? And if the date item is empty, I don't want to create a reminder that doesn't have a correct date or doesn't have a date by so to speak. So I show a toast. So toast is toast dot make test. It takes application context and then the test that you want to show and how long you want the toast to show. And there are several of them. Here we are looking at the short. You can do toast dot length short, length long, depending on how long you want the toast to be. But this one we want it to just show for a short while. And if that is the case, that the test provided in the date component is empty, I don't want to continue again. I show the toast and I cancel the process. So I return. By returning, it doesn't go ahead to execute this continuing code. And out of that data that the person has provided, I create a payment info out of it. So I just take the values that the person has entered, that is have been entered on the app, straight away create a payment info out of it. And with the payment info date, I want to be able to make sure that it actually formatted correctly. So if you look at what we have here in the new payment, you realize that we actually use we gave a hint, right? And we are saying that the date format should be DDMMYYY. But as to whether that is going to be correct, it's also another thing because we did not do any authentication or test masking on that particular field. Even though we say that the input type is actually number, so you see that when we click on it, the number part only shows. For example, this one, the input type is test, so we actually shows it. When I click on it, it shows all the alphanumeric part. But here we are restricting it to only numbers. That's why you see only the numbers when you click on it. But we still have to make sure that the format is correct. So here I actually pick the date and then I split it based on the dot. So this way we are assuming that the date has been entered in this format. So once I split it, the first entry is the date, the day, the second entry is the month, and then the third entry is the year. Out of that, I create a calendar. We need to have access to specific, because I'm converting the date test to actual date class. And by so doing, it's easy to get other properties from that date class. Now, there are other ways of doing this. I think Kotlin has a way of straight away picking the text and converting it to a date. But for demonstration purposes, I wanted to use this, old way of doing it so that we all understand it very well. So after I've created the calendar, what I have here, and let me see if I can increase the font size of the, because I guess you guys don't see it that much. So let me go to settings and I'll go to the editor, code editing font. Maybe it should increase to 20 or 22. Okay, maybe 22 should be good. All right, so I click on it and it becomes a bit bigger for us. So what happens next is that I've been able to get all the components. I've created a payment activity. The next thing that I want to do is that because I cannot access the room database actually on the UI thread. So I need to create a background task or an asynchronous task that actually goes behind the scenes and do the tasks that I want to do. So I have access to the database, and this is how you have access to the database. You call room.database builder, like I showed last week. And with room.database builder, you need to pass in the application context, and then the app database class, which we have here inside our DB, right? So this is the app database, an abstract class with some annotations, which is used in creating the room database. And it's important to call this build so that it actually creates the database if it doesn't exist, or get access to that database if it exists. And out of that, you can be able to have access to payment data object, which we have defined here. And in there, we have a function called insert, right? And we are inserting the payment object that we have created above. So once we do the insert, there's a straight entity relational mapping that converts the object that we have to an SQL script, and it inserts the database. And previously, before room libraries, you have to actually write the SQLite script to do so. But now there is this abstraction that makes it quite easier to do. And once I do the insert, this insert method actually returns a long. So I want to have access to the insert method, which returns a long. And this long, or this long that it returns, is actually the auto increment ID of what I've just inserted. So I have access to that UID. Now, I want to check whether the payment that I've entered happens sometime in the future, right? So if I want to check that, I want to find out the time in milliseconds of that date calendar that I have created here. So out of the date, I created a date calendar. I want to check if the time in milliseconds is greater than the current time. And by so doing, I can do calendar.getInsight.time in millis. So it gets the current time on the phone in milliseconds. And with that, I compare it with the time in milliseconds of the date that the payment is going to happen. And once the date that the payment is going to happen comes after the current time, I decide that it is going to be a payment which is going to happen in the future. So okay, is the font size clear now? Anusha? Is the font size clear now? Because I see in the chat that the font is not clear, but I guess it should be okay now. Anyway, so after the payment, okay, good, it's good. So after the payment has been, after I've confirmed that this payment happens in a future date, what I'll do is that I now want to create a message out of it. So in Kotlin, we are able to kind of form a string out of the variables by using this string literal. So I'm saying pay somebody this amount into the account number, this account number. So actually, this is the whole test. I start by creating a string, right? I start by creating a string. So I create the string today is, right? And I want to now add today's date, or the date that I have inputted in here. So I just start with the dollar, and it's actually the payment calendar dot, right? The date. So what's the date here? Or time in milliseconds. That's something I can have access to on that payment calendar. Or if I want to have access to the date payment info, and then I can actually have access to the date. So I can form this message, today is the date. So at runtime, it actually gets the value of the date and then adds it to the string, and then save it, get the string for me. So basically that's what we are doing in there. So I'm forming a string message, right? And then out of that string message, I now set the reminder to happen on the date or the time in milliseconds of the payment, right? So I have that function. We are going to go there, but just before we go there, I also want to show a toast. So after all the asynchronous task has been done in this code bracket, which I have shown highlighted now. Actually, this we don't wait for it. So this lines of code actually branches off onto a different thread, but we don't wait for it to finish and tell us that okay, I've done this, we can proceed. What we do is that straight away we can simply go straight and then say that we still check again that okay, the time is in milliseconds, it's in the future, and once that is the future, we show a toast that says that reminder for future payment saved. So basically, that's what the person will see when he clicks on accept, which saves it for the future. You will see that toast like I demonstrated, and these tasks actually happens behind the scenes, right, in the background. So how does the set reminder work? Now let me go to that code. So that code is actually under payment history. Now you realize that in Kotlin, if you want to create what we call static functions or static methods, right? You can put them in what they call companion objects. So you can see that if you come to the code, all the functions that I want to have access to across several activities, I've put them inside this companion object so that I can have access to it. So set reminder, this is set reminder. How does set reminder works? It actually takes the application context, it takes the ID of the reminder that I have saved, which is very important because we need access to that reminder when we are actually saving the reminder. And we also want to get the time in milliseconds of that date that the activity is going or the reminder is going to happen. And then the message that we have created, right? So out of that we create an intent. So we are declaring an intent to the operating system that we want to have access to an activity that happens in the future. By so doing, we are able to attach the IDs and then the message that you want to pass to the intent by doing intent dot put extra, right? Put extra takes a name value pair. So the name is actually UUID and the value is this UUID. The name is a message and the value is the message that I've passed here. Now, because the intent is something that is going to happen in the future, I create, because for example, if you are navigating from one activity to the other, right? You create an intent and you say start activity. Now that one actually happens right away. So you create an intent, start activity, and then the activity starts. But this intent is going to happen sometime in the future. So we have to wrap it around what we call a pending intent. So in the next line, I create a pending intent. So pending intent dot get broadcast, right? So I want to let this intent happen in the future. So I pass this intent, and then I also have here that pending intent dot flag one shot. Now flag one shot is actually meaning that once that intent happens, it actually clears that pending intent from memory or from the system level. There are several options, so you can, if you want to look at what each of them does, you can do so. The next one is that we want to use the alarm manager service in Android to bundle this time activity in the future, so that when the time comes, we are able to listen to a broadcast, right? That would now perform the action. So what happens is that you are actually using a broadcast, listening to the broadcast. When the broadcast happens, we now show the notification. So that's what is happening here. So I set the alarm manager. So alarm manager was set alarm. This alarm, uh, this alarm manager.rtc, and that is also other. There are other ways of also having access to this RTC, but this actually shows what is the time, what time does it show, that should it be exactly as the time that you have spent or you have specified in time in milliseconds, or there can be some kind of a maybe a lag between that, right? So that's how what the RTC does, and then you pass the pending intent. So by this code, we have been able to set the alarm. We set the alarm. Now, what happens? What happens when the alarm goes off? Right, the alarm manager system sends a broadcast that we the time is due. So what happens? We have created this reminder receiver, which we have here, right? And this reminder receiver, we have overridden a function called on receive. Now on receive, here you can look at maybe actually filtering down, because several intents will be sending broadcast to this, but the one that you have registered in your script actually, you can what I want to say is that you can actually restrict which kinds of broadcast is sent to your receiver, but we have not done that here. So we are doing it straightforward. So what happens is that once the broadcast receiver is received, right, the intent that we have saved to the pending intent in the other file is passed to this function, and we are able to retrieve that the value that we put in the put extra based on their IDs. And with that, if the value doesn't exist, I'm saying that if it's an integer, so I'm saying that it should give me 0 if it doesn't exist, right? And the next thing is that I get a test. Actually, the test is what I need. I don't need the UID because I'm not going back to the database to take the value. All that I'm doing is that I actually want to show the test in the notification. But actually, if you are putting in actions on notification, i.e., you want the person to click a certain button on the notification, that would actually eventually go back to the code and delete or maybe perform a certain action on the data that you have saved, then you have to make use of this ID. But then we don't need it for now. So I get a test and then I show a notification. You can see that this payment history is a different activity, and I'm able to have access to the static functions that I've shown you before. So it's actually in the same place where we have the set reminder, right? It's in the same place where we have the set reminder. Now, I forgot to mention that in the intent that we created, or the future intent that we've created for the reminder, we need to pass actually the reminder receiver, or that broadcast receiver, to that intent, so that we register that this intent is actually bound to that broadcast receiver, so to speak. So this intent that we have created is bound to this broadcast receiver, and then it's going to happen in the future. So alarm manager, please notify me when this time in milliseconds is due. So that's how I can explain it in like straightforward logic, so to speak. So now show notification. So what happens when the notification shows? So I'll go back to the demo and then I'll show you what happens. Now let's come to our payment list. If you look at the payment list, we have several of them listed, right? So one of them happens on 3rd February, right, which is tomorrow. So assuming that the time gets to tomorrow on the phone, this notification is actually going to show. So I'll go to the phone and change the time manually to tomorrow. So I'll go to the settings and I'll look for dates. It's actually picking the day from the network, which in this case maybe the computer itself. So I'll change the date to 3rd. Now, once I click on OK, behind the scenes there's a broadcast because this date value has changed. So the broadcast fires in the operating system level, and once that broadcast fires in the operating system level, I expect that I see the what do you call the notification that shows. So maybe that notification that I'm showing here is actually a pending intent that happens once. So I'll create a fresh. I'll see which one of the ones that we created today. Okay, we created this the last one today, right? It's actually on 5th November, 5th February. So I'll change the time to 5th February instead of the one that we showed. I've probably used that notification already. So no, I go to settings. Sorry, I go to settings, and then I look for the date, and then I change it to 5th. Now, immediately I change it to 5th, behind the scenes, the broadcast happens, and because this broadcast has been actually bound to this current time in milliseconds, or this 5th November, 5th February in milliseconds, with the alarm manager, straight away the receiver receives that broadcast. And here the show notification actually shows this notification. I would scroll down, you see that I have the notification showing here, right? And in here I say that pay this person to this account, this amount of money into this account. You can be creative with the message that you show, depending on what you want to achieve on that, or the communication you want to convey. So basically that's what happens here. Now let's go back to the code and see how that happens. Now I go to show notification, right? Now with show notification, what will happen here is that I need a notification channel, right? So it's actually some unique test or unique ID for all the notifications that are happening in your app, right? So with the notification channel, you now want to create a notification, and for each notification to out of the you have the notification channel that is actually identifying all the notifications on your app, and for each notification to you need a notification ID. So that's why I randomly generated some ID here to create a notification ID. Now I want to create the notification itself. So with notification creating, what you do is that you do the what we call the builder pattern. So out of the notification compat, you call notification compat dot build dot builder, and then the builder you pass uh, application context, which is a context that will be passed to this function, and the notification channel, which we have here. Now, you can set several items notification. The first one that I have here is that dot set small icon. So the small icon is this icon, this icon that is showing. If you can see my mouse, I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but if you can, the small icon is what the icon that is showing on notification. That small icon that you see there, right? Besides the lab banking app title, or that's the app name itself. So you see that's the small icon. Now the set content title is lab banking app. We could have changed it to anything that we want. That will be the content title, which the content title is this one, this message, this lab banking app that you see here. So let me, for purposes of maybe clarity, let me change it. And okay, when I change, I have to create a new item that happens in the future, because the notification that has been flagged by our configuration of the intent we said, sorry, by our configuration of the reminder intent, we say that it should flash once. So once the notification shows, that intent has been cleared from the system. So it doesn't happen anymore. The notification will not be showed anymore because that pending intent has been cleared. So I would go further and say that the content text is the message, right? So that is the message that shows below the lab banking app. Now, notification dot. So you can change all the attributes that you want to have do them on that notification compact builder. So here you can add actions, even actions, or if, for example, in most sensing applications, right? If you are consistently sensing data from the background and you want to make the user aware that you are actually collecting data, what you do is that, for example, you can set ongoing. Sorry, you can set ongoing, right? And then you say true. Now, the effect of this is that the notification, even if you click on clear all, it doesn't clear, it will be hanging, it will be sticking there. And it sometimes it might, I don't know whether I should say it might be annoying to have those, sticky notifications there, but it's also good for transparency when you want to make the person aware that, hey, I'm collecting your location as at now. Hey, I'm collecting your audio as at now. But anyway, it depends on your design and what you want to do with your application. So there are several other properties that you can set on the notification. So if you look at the documentation that we have shared on the slides, right? This notification, when you go to that documentation, this link, right? You have a lot of them, and it actually explains them, what these things achieve when you use them. So we will stick to this for this time being. Now, after you have built your notification, what you do is that you now have, because a certain service actually controls how the notification shows. So you now want to get access to that service by saying that the application context dot get service, and the service is a notification service, and then you cast it as a notification manager. So that service manages all the notifications on the whole on the system, right? So this notification service, you now want to create a notification with that notification service. But because of API changes and the development of Android, in certain versions of Android, you don't need a notification channel. But in versions that are greater than Android version 8, right? Or since this version, you need to explicitly create a notification channel. Otherwise, the notification will not work, or you have errors when you run this code. I think at coding time, you will not see it because it doesn't know which OS that you want to run on. But when you run it and it is not Android version 8 or higher, this this actually would not work. So you need specifically to check that if the build version SDK ain't is actually greater than Android O, which is Android 8, you want to create a notification channel. So I create the notification channel, right? And with the channel ID that I have here, I have that channel, that same channel ID here, and then I apply a description. So just a description, and out of that notification manager, which is the service that controls the notification, I say create notification channel with the channel that I've created. So this notification manager will have that channel in case I am running on Android 8 or higher. Now the next step is that notification manager, please notify me with this notification. So notification manager, show this notification, and this notification is what I've used the notification builder to build. Now, it is very important to actually finally call this build on the notification manager, because at this point The builder pattern is actually allowing you to kind of have a blueprint of the notification itself. So you are able to, set the title, the small icon, the content test, the ongoing, the styles, whether the priority is, you know, and then set the group. You are able to set several properties on the notification itself. But what happens is that the notification itself has not been created. So all the builder is doing is actually doing some kind of blueprint or some sketch or a prototype on a paper. So think about it in that way. And when you now click on build, which is the build method on notification builder, this is when the actual notification is actually created in memory for you. So remember that you always have this build from the notification builder. So actually, this says that notification manager dot notify with the notification ID and notification dot build. So this straight away builds the notification and then it shows as we have here. So that's how you are able to set the reminder, which is actually a service that you now bind a reminder, a broadcast receiver to that service, right? Because that service is sending a broadcast at every stroke of time in milliseconds. So the time that you have specified in the reminder actually happens. When the time that you have specified in the reminder actually happens, it sends a broadcast as it usually always does anyway, and then your reminder receiver will actually receive that broadcast because that time is due. And basically what happens is that it now you perform the actions that you want to perform in the code. So, but the like I said in the slides already, one of the most important things that you need to do is that with this reminder receiver, you have to put it in the manifest. So I'll go to the manifest now. Manifest. So this is a manifest, and this manifest is an XML file structure. Now there are several items in there. Sometimes people probably make mistakes and they put the receiver somewhere else, but make sure that you put it inside the application level. So all these are the activities, all the activities that we have created. So you don't put it anywhere else. You want to put it at the application level. So it's supposed to be in the same level as the activity. So you put receiver and then the name of the receiver. So if you have several of those in here, you can add them here. If you don't add them, it doesn't work and it doesn't show you error even on the Android Studio, but it will not work in the future. So that's very important. Anytime you create it quickly. I don't know why, as at now, Android Studio doesn't automatically add it to the manifest. But anyway, you have to put it in mind that once you create that receiver, broadcast receiver, you have to add it to the manifest. Okay, so let me go back to the explanation that I'm doing. So here I'm able to show the notification. So quickly, when the reminder flags, I get the intent that I sent here. Let me show you that intent. That this intent is this same intent is the intent that I created. This intent, right? I created this intent, and with that intent, I added the message that I needed to show on the notification. And I said that it's going to happen in the future. I bind it to an alarm manager service. So when that reminder happens in the future and I get the broadcast, I'm able to get access to that same intent that I created with the broadcast. And then I'm able to get access to the extras or the values that I added to the intent, which is in this case, I'm interested in the message. And in the message, I actually have access to that text and I show notification. So it's actually 8:59. Maybe we would break for some 10 minutes and we would continue from there. But we are here. If you have any questions as at now, you can still shoot them. But let's continue at 9:10. And whilst we are on break, if you want to download the code, I have it on Moodle. So I'll show it. This is the code, and it's actually here on Moodle. It's actually in the previous exercises link. So you have the link for all the exercises. Anytime we finish the exercise, we update that code. So this link actually has access to all the code. Yes, please have a look at it and play around a bit. So I have the code here, so you can download it quickly and take a look at it. If maybe you joined late and you are unable to set up, so that you can follow along, make changes, play along with it, and probably send us feedback if you have any. So if you have any specific questions about certain portions of the code, why certain things are happening, we are also here to answer the questions. So I'll be right back. Okay, welcome back from the break. So during the break, there were some questions about homework one. So I think that Aku just sent a message to myself, and okay, I thought it was a message for everybody, but there was a question about homework one, and I think that maybe Aku would. Okay, Aku have answered the question, and he says that the question was that do we need to implement add task feature? I mean add task. So it's there, and Aku answers that homework one only the interfaces are required. No need to add any functionality except the activity should change when, example, a button is clicked. So that's the answer for that question. Also, I see a question from Jonas, and it says that the RoomDB implementation, the last exercise uses async task that seems to be deprecated. Is there any alternatives? Jonas, which because I've checked when you said it, and I don't really see it from my side that is actually deprecated. So I'm actually trying to find out why that you are having access to that. But check if your dependencies versions are actually the same as API level 30. Okay, you have API level 30, and I have minimum SDK version 19, target 29. Okay. So I probably that's why we are having that change. But anyway, I don't have an answer directly to that right now, so I have to probably do some digging to come back to you on that question. So I'll get back to you in the future, probably through the Moodle or maybe send a message. So I'll pick that question and put it now. Okay. So I'll come back to you sometime in the future. And but of course, as at API level 29 and what we have there works. So for now, let's go with what we have in here. Okay. So he was asking about this asynchronous task. And in previous versions, I think we had access to Anchor, which also had some another asynchronous task. But when we were preparing for this exercise, Anchor has been Anchor, which is ANKO, has also been deprecated. So we had to completely remove them and fall back on the original async task that we know in in Android, Java, which has a Kotlin implementation. But I'll get back to that question later. Okay, so now the final thing that we need to do is now when we click on any of these list items on the application, we want to be able to delete that item which we have done previously. Now when I click on delete, I want to delete the item and also delete or also cancel the notification so that the item is not available but the notification may not show in the future. So there will be some confusion. So when I click on delete and I delete the item, if there is any notification with that item, I want to also clear that one as well. So what happens when I delete this one? I click on delete. It actually deletes the item, but behind the scenes, what happens? So I go to payment history, which is the list, and here I say that payment history list item on click, right? And when I click on it, I want to show that pop-up message that I have here, which is this one. So in the same way, I build a message out of the payment info on that list. And by that, I have access to the adapter, and the adapter is able to get the position on that list. So maybe the fifth item, and it gets that payment info for me. And out of that payment info, I have access to the amount. And so I'm able to create the message. Do you want to delete this amount payment on this date? Right. And again, I use the builder. I use a builder pattern again. So with that, I say alert dialog dot builder. With that, I'm able to add a lot of features that I want to that builder. So I want to set the title, which is I have here delete reminder, which is this one. I want to set the set positive button. So that's the button that will show on the right side from my screen. I don't know whether in the left to right screen it will show on the left side, but sorry, I don't know whether on the right to left screen it will show on the left side, but here we have it on the right side. So that is the icon that shows on the right side. That's the delete, and it automatically adds this cancel for me. So I don't need to have any code behind this cancel, but it asks it to be able to cancel the notification. So when the person clicks on this delete, actually I want to go back to the database, right, and delete the item with this specific ID. The ID is from the payment info that I have here, right? So I now delete that item through the database. So it goes to the database and deletes the item for me. And this is actually done asynchronously, which is actually a new thread behind the scenes. But once that is deleted, there's the other way is that if you really want to make sure that the item has been deleted, you have to now probably implement this structure where we have doing background and on post execute. So on post execute would, so you make sure that everything happens here, and once the background task is done, it returns a certain value for you. And in on post execute, you are actually sure that based on the return value that you receive here, you can decide that actually the item has been deleted or not. But in our now implementation, we are just trusting that okay, the item will delete. So we only implement the do in background here, which is the execute. And in here, after the execute, we go straight to cancel the notification or cancel the reminder that we have set. Remember that when we create the the payment, which happens if it happens in the future, we create a reminder. So we now, if we have deleted that event or that payment, we want to now cancel the reminder. So what we do is that we go to cancel reminder, which is actually here in the companion methods, which is a static function. It takes an application context and the pending intent ID. Now you can see that in the pending intent, we have an ID, and what we did was that we use the same ID of that what do you call that payment that we created. So we realize that it's easy for us to use that same ID from the payment info. So here we create an intent which is still bound to the reminder receiver, right? And we create that same pending intent like we have done before. And with the alarm manager, we now cancel that pending intent. So that pending intent will use the same ID as we have done before, right? So it gets that pending intent, this one that we did in the set reminder, it gets this one. Once it gets that pending intent, we now use alarm manager service to cancel that pending intent. So what it means that that pending intent that is going to let the notification show or that runs the broadcast receiver is actually cancelled from memory. So our broadcast will not be listening to that event or that broadcast that happens on that specific time in milliseconds. So that broadcast or that reminder is cancelled. So let me delete this, and when we delete it, what happens is that the um, broadcast is cancelled. Okay, so I think we have been able to demonstrate all that we set out to do for today. One, one important, for example, one important thing in Android programming, or for example in programming in general, is to be able to debug your code, assuming that there's something happening weird in there and you want to actually see, because as it's happening now, when we click on some button, something happens and we don't know like step by step what actually happens. So we would, for example, do an example of how to debug in Android Studio, and that I hope that it will help us when we are doing our homework. So typically, let's go to a payment activity, right? So we know that when somebody clicks on accept, right, we know that this is the code that happens, but we want to see, have an eye in there. When we click on the accept, it runs like speedy, and then we don't know what happens. So we want to have an eye behind there and see line by line what is happening. So what we do is that we call something a breakpoint. A breakpoint is actually a point in an execution where the code will stop and wait for your action. So I want to set a breakpoint on line 24. So I come to line 24 and I click there, and you see that this red item has been created for me. So that's the breakpoint. For the breakpoint to actually hit, or for your code to get there and stop, you need to be debugging instead of running. So there are two ways you can be running, and running is like visually it's the same as debugging. It will show you everything the same, but debugging is actually when you want the breakpoints to run, and you want to see what is happening step by step. So if you want to do the debugging, you have to actually say debug. Otherwise, this breakpoint will not run. So I come to debug instead of this run. I come to debug. So visually, it's the same. It starts to build the app, and it shows on my it shows on the emulator. Okay, so I click on new payment, and let's say I enter certain values, right? The Hopkins, for example, and maybe I have to pay some amount in their Finish account, and I want to pay it in a certain date and a certain amount. So when I click on accept, you realize that when I click on the accept, it doesn't finish and flash off. It actually comes here and it stops at this line of code, actually the breakpoint that we have created. And with that breakpoint, you now have access to, okay, what are the values that the application has at this point in time, or in this local block, which is the override function create. So in here, you can see that, okay, I want to inspect specifically what is happening in there. So this is actually the whole interface, and you also have access to other things. So let me now come to, we have variables, right? Local variables. And so let me now, I want to move to the next line, right? I want to move to the next line. So by moving to the next line, you can see the debugger has these functions here. I have step over, I have step into, and what have you. So I want to step over the line and come to the next line. So I click on step over, and step over would actually jump this whole function, because it says that if this detail box is empty, right, it should do this whole thing. If not, it should jump the if, which is actually is not empty, so it comes here. Now I want to see the values that, let me close this and it. If I want to watch a specific value, right, I can click on this watch and create a watch, so that I want to see a specific value. But let's say that I want to continue, and click on step over again, and you see that it gets a now. Step over again, you see that it gets the values, and maybe I want to see what is inside payment info. Payment info should be available here. If not, okay. So now, what are the values that I'm seeing in here? So I can actually hover on it. Okay, I don't know why. So step over again, right? And you can see the values line by line, what is happening. That's, even if you want to sometimes understand which portions or what is the flow, sometimes the code can be plenty and you are confused. Where does the code pass when you, where does the execution pass when you do specific actions, right? So you want to see what is happening in there. So step over again, step over again, and this step over actually creates the payment info for me now. So here I have this payment info variable has been created, and here it shows me some, the actual values in there. And again, here in the variables, you can also inspect what is happening in there. So sometimes you code and maybe certain values are not passed correctly. It might be a typo, it might be a mistake, or it might be a bug. So you can, step into the lines one after the other, like I'm doing now, to see what is happening. So here you can actually now confirm that yes, you have the correct values from your interface to the object. So maybe you are satisfied that okay, everything is happening. You can go ahead to do the step in, but now I want to, okay, I'm satisfied that these variables are correct and these values are okay, right? I want to continue the execution. So I can now, if you want to look for it from the menus, you can go to run, right? And is it, sorry, you can go to run and there is continue. Okay, I think when you click on F9, right, you want to continue the execution. So the shortcut is F9, right? So the shortcut is F9. When you click on F9, realize that it quickly stops the debugging and it goes back to the normal execution plan. So that's how the debugging works. If you don't take away this breakpoint, if you are, for example, if you are done doing the debugging, if you don't take away this breakpoint, anytime you click on that button, it will hit the breakpoint when you are debugging. So if you don't need it, you can click on it again and that breakpoint goes away. So that's how to do debugging. You can do same for all aspects of the code, and you have an eye in there how the values at runtime, how the objects are looking at, and which values are accessible at which point in time, and stuff like that. So that's how the debugging works, and I hope that you will be able to use this to do your project. So this brings us to the end of today's exercise. And like I've shown already, all the codes are available now on Moodle. So this is the GitHub link. If you click on it, you have access to all the code. So you can download it, work around it, play around it, and then see how it works, right? And if you have any questions, you can ask them now, and we are here to answer you. So I think for all intents and purposes, today's lab is over, if I may say so. And we are here until the time elapses. And if you have any questions, you can ask. So I'll now go back to Jonas's question and maybe quickly do some digging now. But anyway, okay. Okay, so it says this class was duplicated. Okay, use the standard Java concurrent. Okay, so that's the answer for you. It's saying that you have to use this concurrent view model of lifestyle scope, life cycle scope, suspend life. Okay, so Jonas, if you are there, I think that what you this is what you need to do. It's something what they call core routines in Kotlin. So instead of this asynchronous task in API level 29 and below, you have to use the core routines. And I've not used this before, so I cannot answer much. But if you are reading what I'm reading, this is the probably the documentation that you need to do. I'll post it on the chat. For the rest of us, you may not have to worry about this for now, because the code that I have given you uses API level 29, so everything works. But I think that when you are going for API level 30, you have to change. And it happens. It happens all the time that anytime there is an upgrade in Android version, certain things change. So don't be afraid that things may keep on changing. And I think that was some of the things that Denzel talked about when he gave the lecture last 2 weeks. That most of the times things change, and you sometimes that's the worry of programmers. You have to always continue chasing targets that are changing, and sometimes the change is actually enormous. And assuming you have an enterprise level application and the codes are millions of lines, and you actually uses this library in several places, and you have to now change everything, and when you change it something breaks, and you know but of course that's why programmers are paid to do this kind of things, to make sure that systems are working. So that's about it. So it talks about life cycle scope, and I have not used this before. I've not seen it before. It talks about live data as well, and stuff like that. So okay, it's actually using some room example here. So when you want to do room database, you have to use live data. So live, you can emit multiple values from live data by calling the emit. Okay, so it talks about how to use core routines when you are doing live data.
Yeah, I think Kotlin's preferred way of running background tasks is using coroutines.
Come again?
Kotlin's preferred way of doing background tasks, anything
Uh-huh.
that they think needs to be run on the background thread, is to use coroutines.
Okay. Okay, sure. So I think that also goes to answer what do you call it? Eunice's question. But
Yeah, so I
um,
think that is why they are forcing him
yeah,
to
with that
use
with the
coroutines rather
API
than
level 30, yes, it's
yeah.
maybe they are now getting much stricter on these things, and they have deprecated asynchronous task as at API level 30. So that's about it. Anyway, okay, so there's back and backward compatibility, like Aku has put on the chat. So it says that it should be noted also that applications created for API level 29 would function in would function for API level 30 plus. It always has backward compatibility. Okay. So any other questions? Okay, so I'll probably pause the recording now, and we will still be here. If you have any questions, you can ask, and then we uh, try to answer. Thank you for coming to this lab exercise, and I'll see you next week.